So that's the unique thing about disruption. Some of the examples that I've got here, like when I was talking about the retail, then the next step is Amazon. And they have definitely disrupted the retail business, and they're now a very viable concern, growing very fast with, I think, 50,000 employees versus 2.1 million for Walmart. So they've got an interesting model going. BlackBerry, you might not even recognize this. This is the old BlackBerry. I actually had one of these. Back in the day, I'll never forget that thing. BlackBerry is a little different. It's more of what you call a new market disruption. So I've talked a lot about low-end disruption. The other one is new market disruption, where you actually bring more customers. You enlarge the pie. So you touch more customers. Let me give you a great example. The Nintendo Wii. Anybody here have a Nintendo Wii? Okay, anybody here have a Sony PlayStation or an Xbox 3? Now, was that the same people? I should have been watching closer, because it usually isn't. And here's what was happening, was there was all this battle between these games consoles, and they were getting more and more sophisticated, more and more detailed, and Nintendo went a completely different direction, said, well, what if we targeted people who don't play games? So let's take the technology. We can't keep up with how sophisticated these guys are getting with their graphics and with their complicated algorithms and so on and so forth. So let's go for a simpler model that has something different, which is the motion detection. And absolutely a total new market disruption, because it increased the universe of people interested in gaming. So that's a new market. Digital photography was another disruption that eventually took hold. Big struggles for Kodak dealing with that. And steel mini mills, one of the best known disruptions, because a company called Nucor said, look, you know, like all of this repar and recycled cars, we think we can build something out of that, rather than going and mining iron ore out of the mountains. So there's lots of different ways that disruptions can take over industries and be very powerful. But they don't always work. MySpace, what happened to them? Mm-hmm. They're kind of still around, didn't really float. What do you think about this? Winning idea? It's pretty simple. You can drive around town real quick, easy. What do you see that's a problem with that? Sorry? Death trap. Okay, that kind of sums all the comments. We don't need any more. Remember the Segway? It was going to change how we all move. So disruptions don't always work out. And so when you're sitting in a place like this, and you're maybe a realtor, you're saying, gee, Jim, you can't necessarily dive in. Can't necessarily dive into the low end because it might not take off. I'm not really sure what the new market disruption might be. We've all said in here that there's going to be some change. So what does Yogi Berra say? Anybody know one of his famous sayings? It's like deja vu all over again. That's true. And the other one is, when you get to the fork in the road, take it. So that probably doesn't help you much. Here's the options of how you can respond. People can just put their head in the sand. They can be very active in their proactive resistance. One way of doing that would be to get legislation to stop any change from happening. You can just adopt the change. If you say, hey, that looks like a good way to make money, just dive in. Or you can do something that we call resilience. So here's a model that we developed out of the last research, actually, and some other research we've done. We said, well, what if people take a look at whether something is a threat to their organization, or if they have the capabilities inside to make it an opportunity? Well, the easy one is, if it's a low opportunity, low threat, just ignore it. That's just an idea. It's not going to fly. It's the latest idea of Segway. Just ignore it. Now, if it's a high opportunity but a low threat, then you might say, hey, opportunity. We've got particular skills in our operation. We can take advantage of that. We can build a competitive advantage on it. So there'd be proactive adoption. Also, the easy one, if there's a low opportunity but a high threat, if you feel that this change is really out to destroy your industry, than proactive resistance. And honestly, we saw a lot of that. Certainly a lot of that in the US with the National Association of Realtors in the early 2000s. And they said, whoa, we don't like this change. And we're going to do everything we can to stop it. And a lot of the states set up lots of regulations on what's minimum service levels and so on and so forth. Competition bureaus got involved. That's how proactive resistance starts. And then there's this group of people who say, well, yeah, this is threatening, but maybe we can get an opportunity out of it. We're just not sure. So that's where we focus our attention. And if we take that little diagram down to the bottom here and say, okay, so we're looking at that one corner where there's high threat and high opportunity. And let's layer on top of that the measure of urgency. In other words, how fast is this going to come about? And on the horizontal axis, your experience with making risky decisions. Because what's been found in the research is if you make a decision, a business decision in one area, and it's high risk, and it's successful or negative, that will greatly influence your confidence in doing another risky decision, even if it's in a totally different area, totally different circumstances. So you can build up some confidence in your ability to deal with issues as they come about. Okay, so in this matrix, if you have negative risk experience, in other words, the risky decisions don't really work out for you, and there's no big urgency, well, you'll just defer. So you'll just sit back, say, I don't want to be a part of this, and I don't see any need to be part of it. Also, though, if there's low urgency and positive risk experience, you might monitor. And it's my sense, I would be willing to bet that a lot of the realtors in here, and by the way, according to the stats I have, somewhere in the order of 2/3 of the people in here are either agents or brokers. And I think because you're interested and you come to something like this, you're probably in this box. You're monitoring, you're saying, well, I'll just keep an eye on what's going on out there. If there's high urgency, so if it becomes very soon that the change is going to happen, but you still had bad risk experience, you'll acquire. So you'll find another firm, maybe a smaller firm, that's adapting very well, or somebody from another industry that's helped adapt into your changes in their industry. Say, well, I'm going to acquire those skills. I'm going to hire some new people. I'm going to hire a consultant. I'm going to acquire another firm, get myself up to speed. And finally, most resilient people will try over time to get themselves to a position where they can adopt. So if you see that change is going to happen in 3 to 5 years, you'll slowly build up the resources, the capabilities, so that you can adopt when it comes along. You'll notice I put a circle around the right side as an area where managers should really focus. Now, how do you make sure that you get to that side of this chart? You have to be curious. Yes? Expectation of positive outcomes, very good. Somebody over here had a... Push the boundaries, absolutely. So that's, gain that experience. You have to give people, one of the big fears I have with everybody having BlackBerries and checking with their boss all the time is how do the people who work for you build that positive risk experience? So that's one message I pretty much give to any business crowd I talk to, is if you want to be on the right side where you're really in control of what happens, you can't control the timing, but you want to be on the right side there, because then you are able to choose when you should be monitoring and when you should be adopting. That means that you have to give people positive risk experience opportunities. And ironically, what that means is the more failure they have, if they're good people, you got to give them more chances to build up that positive risk. And there's lots of great stuff. Actually, Honda has this phenomenal video called Failure, the Secret of Success. And it's all about how taking chances, experimenting, That's the way that you keep yourself on that right side so you're as nimble as can possibly be and able to take on new opportunities. Okay, so industries that have suffered, travel agents, stockbrokers, little old ladies who used to match people up, they all took a hit with the internet coming on. Why them and not real estate or real estate yet? Okay, so this is exercise number 2 with the person close to you. Identify 2 reasons why real estate hasn't fallen the way of travel agents and stockbrokers and matchmakers. Okay, so let's hear some ideas. Okay, yes, we got an idea right up here.
I think the buyer controls the equation in this because the buyer doesn't pay anything to have a realtor represent them, and then the realtor that's representing them isn't going to buy from a we list. They're going to buy from another realtor.
Okay, so this is a thing. Your name, sorry? James. James has a complex and very thorough explanation that in the case of real estate, the buyer is in control. The buyer sees all the selection. The buyer has an agent on their side that they don't even have to pay, at least visibly. They don't see the payment, and then that agent will be looking for other agents to connect with. They're not going to go to WeList. They're not going to go to, can I say names? Am I in trouble if I say that? Anyhow, they can't go to any of these free services, or they won't, because they value a realtor on the other side, so the equation gets largely controlled that way. That's kind of got it?
Yeah.
Okay, any other ideas? Yes?
This transaction is fairly complex, but it's something that people only go to every 5 to 10 years, as opposed to traveling or buying stocks or well, maybe getting married every 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so it's complex. Sorry? Oh yeah, so what he was saying was a house transaction, buying your own home, it's complex and it's infrequent. So you don't do it very often, and there's a lot of, there's lawyers and there's engineers and there's, oh my God, it's hairy, it's confusing, and it's big. It's a big purchase. Maybe not quite, well, for some people bigger than getting married, but it's big. Okay, yes?
The biggest risk, the homeowner. It's an unconscious investment, probably,
Yep.
and you're not willing to take a chance.
So what she's saying is it's the biggest investment people will make. It's their largest investment, and they're not willing to take a chance. Why would you take a chance? Yes?
I think the industry has really lobbied to preserve it and preserve itself.
Okay, so the industry has done a good job of lobbying or whatever they have to do to preserve their position, yes?
Highly personal, highly emotional.
Highly personal, highly emotional, so that's a good reason to have an agent on your side. Okay, yes?
Personal safety. If you're just opening a house up to people for selling, leaving the most complicated.
Okay, great. So those who didn't hear, personal safety, if you're just opening your house to whoever, how do you know that you can trust them, that something bad isn't going to happen, Alan?
Education.
Education, can you?
A large amount of information someone needs to know a specific area.
Okay, so you get that expertise, the education, the realtor will help you to understand the community, what's happening in the community, what's coming up. Very good, Stuart?
It's a highly diversified product.
Yep.
You don't have very much standardization. So one home in one area is completely different than a house that's 2 doors down.
So if I was trying to sell and said you can have any color you want as long as it's black, it's probably not going to fly.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
It's licensed and legislated.
Licensed and legislated, very good. So, people can't just hang up their shingle, hello, I'm your friendly neighborhood realtor. And by the way, I did pass the course. Myrna?
No, I'm just going to say, with respect to legislation, it is difficult for people that wanted to come up with a new model to do real estate. In fact, the whole industry found out what our challenges were when people tried to do that.
Okay, so the legislation itself limits the options. So sometimes people have good ideas, but because of the legislative infrastructure in place, okay, competition issues and so on and so forth, it actually binds you in. So it's good. And somebody had actually said that it protects your position, but it could be a negative in terms that it limits you from growing into new areas. Very good.